The things you can only see when you slow down.
Welcome to Keep It Fictional, a weekly podcast for book lovers by book lovers. Build your to-be-read list with Sadie, Liz, Virginia, Fiona, and Corrine from the Port Moody Public Library. Warning, this podcast contains strong opinions and may cause an increase in your library holds list.
Unlike the cheetah, humans are persistent hunters. We don't do one giant leap into the gazelle's back and then chomp down on them. No. We follow our prey, walking after them, stalking them, waiting. We might not be able to outrun you, but we can outwalk you. We're here for the marathon to eat that juicy gazelle. It doesn't matter how long it takes. If you enjoyed that metaphor, let me extend it further. Sometimes a book is a quick snack. You pounce on it, you devour it as soon as you get it home from the library. And some books take a while. You slowly plod away at them, page by page, sometimes taking days, weeks, months, years to finally finish. Today, we are going to look at some books that are kind of like the ones that we thought might have got away, but they didn't because we hunted them down and killed them this week. Welcome to Keep It Fictional, a book podcast for book lovers and lovers of extended metaphors. I am Corrine from the Port Moody Public Library, joined here today by my book friends Sadie and Virginia, all of whom do not care for my extended metaphor, which I thought was pretty good. To be fair, did I think of it at 3 o'clock in the morning? Yeah, but it's really good. So we are talking today about books that we have been reading or took us a long time to read or took us a long time to get through. And this was, I can't speak for my other book friends. This is a tough one because I usually read my books in one sitting, one and done. I am the cheetah on the savannah. So Sadie, are you more of a cheetah or more of I was going to say human is the other word in my metaphor. So this is very quickly fallen apart.
I mean, I want to be the cheetah because of those two, I feel like the cheetah is probably the coolest one. But in regards to book reading speed, I am usually more of the human. There's got to be a better. I'm going to say I'm more of the tortoise. I'm more of the tortoise in that situation. I don't tend to read my books all in one sitting. Actually, I don't know if I've ever, maybe kids' books in one sitting. Before I had a child, I was like a solid 3 days to a week reader. Like that was kind of my standard for the podcast. I could usually start a book the week before and be done it in time for the podcast. Since having a child, that has changed slightly. Now it usually takes me about 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 weeks to get through a book, depending on the book. Yeah, I would definitely say I'm not the cheetah when it comes to book reading.
That's okay. You're kind of like one of those like spiders that builds like a little basket nest with like a fake top. And so when like the insects crawl across it, then you're like, Jaw, oh no, they're in your trap. And then you're like, haha, I'll eat you at my leisure.
Really don't care for that spider metaphor, but okay.
I feel like our animal metaphors might be, I feel like we're stretching a little bit with our animal metaphors here.
Disagree. This makes perfect sense. All right, Virginia, are you more of a cheetah or I know you don't care for a spider metaphor? I'm sure there's a fish that does the same thing. A slow, sharky fish.
Well, I was originally going to say like a puppy, a dog that just get very distracted very easily because I have like multiple things going on at the same time usually. And so I'll just be like really, really intensely like reading one. And then I'll just drop it and be like, because something new has showed up. And then I'll just be like, oh, look, there's something new over there. Let's check that out instead. So I feel like I'm kind of more that.
Fair enough to choose a cuter animal. So before we started this podcast, I asked my book friends, so what book has been on your to be read pile for the longest, sitting there, a juicy gazelle waiting to be eaten, that you have avoided for the longest time? and not that this is a competition, but I'm going to start off with the book that is mine of February 2010. It is Leviathan by Scott Westerfield. I think I put this on when I was in library school and was in like a YA reading class. And, you know, steampunk had a moment there, didn't it? And I did start this book. I think I read the first chapter, which is unusual for me to not finish a book once I've started it. But this one I read it and then I realized that the ships were whales and like sentient whales that were propelled, I think, by farts. I could be wrong. And at that point, my brain like ground to a screeching halt of anger and I haven't been able to pick it up. And so I have maybe no intentions of finishing it. But yeah, Sadie, what about you? How far does this go?
Oh, I got you beat. So according to my Goodreads, it says it's been on the list since 2013, but I think that was when I set my Goodreads up. And so I think that was when I added a slew of books onto it. But this one, I know I started in grade 12. And so it has been on the list for 21 years. And this is the classic Les Miserables. We used to have reading time in my English literature class. And so I started the book during that. I have this this teeny tiny little copy. I took it onto Antiques Roadshow when I lived in Lethbridge, thinking that it would be worth something. And I was told that it was probably not even worth the £1 that I paid for it at the UK street market that I bought it from. But that's okay. That's okay. It's still cool looking. So I've had that book and I still have that copy of it somewhere. I've read maybe the first 3 or 4 chapters, however they are laid out in that book. I could not get past the part about the priest. There's a very large chunk at the beginning that's about the priest. Maybe, I'm not going to say the age, but this age of Sadie might be better able to handle it than 17-year-old Sadie. But yes, so that one has been on the list for 21 years.
Yeah, I think you're definitely winning at this point. You're definitely winning. Virginia, can you come in like a dark horse?
No, because I don't really have a list like that in many ways. So I don't really have anything. And I was saying to both of you earlier, I'm like, it's going to be a lie, whatever I say, because I'm sure there would be other books that would come to my mind. But I'm pretty sure the book that I've always wanted to read that I have never got to, House of Leaves. House of Leaves. Can't do it. I pick it up every single time. It's chunky, it's heavy. And then I'm like, which way am I turning this book around again today? So yeah. And then of course, after Gabriel talked about it, I was like, oh, maybe I'll make it one of the books that I'll read for the podcast so that I can force myself to read it. And then they talk about it. I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's out. So I'm like, I have no incentive now to make myself do this. But House of Leaves, I've got a copy. It's one of the discarded copy from the library. I'm like, I'm going to pick it up one day. But I don't know when that day is going to be. So yeah.
Is there also two of our books that Gabriel has read and talked about on this podcast?
Yes. So
sorry, Gabriel. All right. Well, so today we gently forced ourselves, we cornered ourselves into this assignment of reading that book that took us a really long time to get through. So we're going to go with Sadie because you're right there.
Aren't we all just right here? Aren't we all just on a screen right in front of you? Anyways, that is fine. And I'm going to preface this by saying that there is no reason at all why this book took me as long as it did to read. It is short. It is under 300 pages. And while it does move a little bit slower than typical books that I usually pick up, it has enough action, it has enough characterization to kind of draw you in. So I have no idea, no idea why it took me as long as it did. So I actually first picked this book up for one of our books in translation episodes a couple years ago. And then it took me so long to read that I was not able to use it for that episode. Now, some of the time could it be because it had to go back to the library. The ebook was returned and I had to wait on a holds list again for it to be available again. And so some of the time that I was waiting for that, but also it should not have taken me almost a month to read this book. Anyways, I just want to say that I don't think it was the story. I don't think it was the quality of the book itself that made me drag my feet. Overall, I did enjoy this book. I think it just maybe was not the right time. Maybe other things were going on and I just took a while. Anyways, so this is The Old Woman with the Knife by Gu Byeong-mo. And I think Corrine actually mentioned this book on the show during one of our most anticipated episodes once, but only a most anticipated one. And it was translated from Korean by Chi-young Kim. And this story begins with an old woman who boards the subway. She's unassuming. She has on a felt hat and a floral shirt and a medium-sized bag draped over her arm. She is 65 years old, but the lines on her face make her look closer to 80. She comes across as wholesome, refined, respectful. Someone who will be looked over and easily forgotten, like an extra in a movie. She stands calmly until a seat opens up, then sits down and starts looking through an old Bible. In direct contrast to her, on the subway is also a man, maybe in his 50s. He's standing but has fallen asleep and jerks awake suddenly. He proceeds to pester a young pregnant woman to give him her seat and makes a scene until someone else gets up so he can sit down, where he immediately falls asleep again. 5 stops later, both him and the old woman stand at the door to exit the subway car. In the jostle when the doors open, the man is bumped by another passenger, falling and landing face down on the platform, already dead by the poisoned knife that sliced through his leather jacket. The old woman exits into the night, taking the murder evidence with her to take the longest route back to her house. Hornclaw has been a disease control specialist for 4 decades. Even at 65, she is still fit and strong and very dangerous. Her strong reputation at the agency that she works for is known, and she has been skilled, efficient, and most importantly, discreet with her kills since she started. Hornclaw lives a solitary life, just her and a rescue dog that she's named Deadweight. She does her work, she exercises, she checks in with the agency to get new assignments, and that's pretty much it. She's made it a habit not to learn that much about her targets. No more than what she needs to complete the job. The less, the better. This is honestly how she's reached the age that she has in this very dangerous line of work. But Hornclaw is starting to worry. Her hands have been trembling a bit more. Her nerves aren't quite as strong as they used to be. And she's finding that she's making little and some not so little mistakes. She started worrying about what the agency will do when she no longer proves useful. If they'll just pay out her shares and let her live out her days quietly, or if they'll send a younger agent, someone like the cocky, condescending bullfight, to end her. Maybe it would be for the best, she thinks. It's only a matter of time before her mistakes catch up with her. Hornclaw finds herself dwelling on these mistakes more and more. The night when her job went so horribly wrong that she ended up at the clinic with so much blood loss that she could hardly stand. She hadn't realized at the time that the agency's usual doctor, Dr. Chang, who was trusted for his discretion, had already left, and a new young doctor named Dr. Kang was there. She had passed out and was surprised to find an unfamiliar face when she awoke. She should have killed him. He had seen too much. Seen her bloody tools and had sewn up her bloody body. Seen her face. But for some reason, she hadn't. Instead, she kept an eye on him, on his parents' fruit stand in the market, kept an eye on his daughter. She knew she should have stayed away, but there was something that drew her towards the small family, made her want to get to know them, made her want to help them. This was her second big mistake, and one that she would come to regret. Now, the young assassin will always remember the day his life changed forever. He was a child and had just returned home from school when he heard a crash from inside his house. No one but the temporary housekeeper should have been home, so he was puzzled when he pushed open the door and his father's blood-covered body came tumbling out. Another noise caught his attention, and he ran into the living room in time to see a familiar person climbing out the veranda window. The housekeeper, who had been helping out for the last 6 days, who had not a drop of blood on her, but who jumped out the 4th-floor window and disappeared. Now, more than 20 years later, the young assassin is determined to make her pay, make her suffer, make the 65-year-old woman wish she had never touched his family. This book weaves a few different stories together, blending past and present as we learn more about Hornclaw's life and how she came to be an assassin, as well as seeing things from our young assassin's point of view as he plots and plans to take down the woman who ruined his life. The story of the young doctor and his family are also intertwined, and through their story, the author provides some commentary on life in South Korea in the present day. Life that is favoring big corporate stores and leaving small family-run businesses in the dust. The author also uses her story to take a look at aging, take a look at how we see the world as we age, how we see the past, how we see the present, how we see the future, and also how we are seen and what that means to who we are as people. Hornclaw and many other senior citizens in the story are often overlooked, ignored, and mistreated by the younger populations around them. As I said, I did enjoy this book and actually reread a little bit of it as I was putting my write-up together. And so I think that I might end up revisiting it at some point. It is very short after all. It shouldn't take me that long. I think that I lost a little bit of momentum the first time because there was a big gap in the middle where it had to go back to the library. And so I think that if I was able to kind of read through, I would be able to get through it a lot quicker. I think it would flow a lot better. The protagonist was very interesting. She's not always likable. And I think that as someone who has spent her life killing people for money, she comes across as much more of an anti-hero than someone that you're sort of rooting for the whole book. But as you learn more about her past and as you learn more about kind of what led her to be who she is and where she is, she's given more redeemable qualities, I think. And it's clear that she's not as black and white as she may originally seem. I think that this book would appeal to crime readers, but it definitely, as I mentioned at the beginning, it has a slower pace than a lot of, I would say, maybe more Western murder and thriller books. I haven't read a lot of books that are similar to this one, but one of the reviews that I read had compared it to Newcomer by Keigo Higashino and The Killer is Dying by James Salas, neither of which I've read. But if you are looking for something, or if you know one of those two books and know that you've enjoyed them, then this might be one that you would want to pick up. I think that if you do enjoy books with older protagonists, crime-adjacent stories that also have a heavy dose of social commentary, then I think that The Old Woman with the Knife by Gu Byeong-mo and translated by Chi Young Kim would be a good choice for you. And hopefully you will get through it faster than I did.
Nice. Yeah, sometimes the library gods intervene and it just has to go back. It just has to go back. For my book, I have no such excuse because I purchased it. And I do this with a lot of my books in that I purchase them with every intention of reading them and then they sit on the shelf. And so this one is one that I did purchase. I started reading it. I put it on the shelf and haven't touched it for a couple of years. Ironically enough, Sadie, mine is also a South Korean and Canadian author. And today I am bringing a book that has sat on my shelf for an embarrassing amount of time. But I thought I would bring it out today because of a BTS connection. The timing all made sense. Ha, ha, ha. So the author that I wanted to talk about is Tablo. And Tablo describes himself in the book itself as a singer and songwriter. Now, to kind of understand the background for this particular book, I think you actually have to go into the history of Tablo himself. So a couple of sources that I used, or if you're wanting to know more about this particular issue, is there's a 10-part podcast called Authentic, The Story of Tablo. There's also an article from the Stanford magazine, The Persecution of Daniel Lee by Joshua Davis, as well as an article in Vice magazine by Romano Santos. And they all do a really good job of kind of breaking down what this particular artist has been through in his life to really help you understand his work. Tablo is the kind of artist pseudonym of Daniel Lee. He is probably most famous for being a part of Epic High, 3-part rap group with Mithra Jin and DJ Two Cuts, which honestly is like one of the best concerts I have ever been to. They put on a show. When he was in second grade, his family came over from South Korea to Vancouver. And so in many ways, he kind of is a local boy. He went to school here. However, it was not a very positive experience because of the pressure his parents put on him. With his parents' urging, went to Stanford University, where in 3.5 years, he finished both a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in English. 3.5 years. 3.5 years. After that, he went back to Korea, and in 2013, Epic High had their debut. Now, they are one of the first major Korean groups to perform at Coachella. And really, at the height of their career, everything was kind of coming together. He published a book, Pieces of You, which was successful. He got married. Everything in his career was going really well. He was poised to kind of be the next best thing. In fact, Epic High is one of the inspirations for RM and Min Yoongi from BTS. They really kind of set the groundwork for other groups like this. But at the height of their success came what Tablo has described as a kind of Black Mirror-esque event that derailed his entire life. On a website came an anonymous comment that he had lied. They demanded him, "Why don't you tell the truth? Why are you keeping this charade up? You didn't really go to Stanford University." This accusation of fraud from an anonymous poster on a website turned into a phenomenon which is called Tajinyo, which is Korean that has been shortened to "We Demand the Truth" from Tablo. This ended in death threats to him, his family, his wife, his newborn child. People who believed that he was lying about Stanford emailed the university, harassed his teachers online, harassed his friends online, demanding transcripts, diplomas. Eventually, it got so intense, Stanford University had to put out a statement, as well as MBC, who is one of the major Korean broadcasters, put out a documentary where he walked around Stanford and greeted the administrative assistants who said, "Oh, hello, Daniel, nice to see you again," provided transcripts, documents, classes, and still people didn't believe him. It was so damaging that he took to staying in his house. He couldn't leave because strangers in the street would start screaming at him. Eventually, he had to press charges against people who were harassing him. However, the person who was spearheaded or leading this has essentially escaped persecution. This destroyed his life. It sabotaged in his career in ways that we still don't understand the aftermath of. His reputation was tarnished, his group suffered, and his mental health was seriously in decline. Now, between April 2008 and June 2009, and between April 2014 and December 2015, he had an online kind of DJ radio show. Now, he's always been very upfront and through his music about his mental health struggles, both the trauma that he faced as a child with the expectations of his parents and being uprooted from everything he knew into a system and language that he didn't know, to what he suffered through Tajinyo. And through this radio show, he connected with listeners, giving kind of his thoughts on things and sharing musics. And at the end of the show, instead of saying good night, he would have a little pithy statement or aphorism or a little thought of the day. Eventually, all of these were collected into BloNote. I'm definitely not saying that wrong because that sounds really weird. BloNotes, Tablo, BloNotes. It's one of those things that I have read a million times and I've never actually said out loud. And now that I say it out loud, it sounds weird in my mouth. However, we're going to go with it. So this is a collection of all the little sayings, 250 of them that have been, 252 of them that have been translated into English, some of them in handwriting of friends and family that he used to end this radio show. Many of them are about the struggles of mental health. Many of them are about struggling with your self-worth or the pressures of society or the pain of childhood and just being a person. But they're also little statements about resilience, about being hopeful, and about the things that kind of keep you going. Tablo really believes that music saves people, that it can help take you out of a dark place or at least give you the light that you can kind of walk towards. I mentioned this and I kind of chose this book because he has a new song out, which is a collaboration with RM, which again is kind of bravely and honestly talking about the frank struggles with mental health, both that of childhood trauma that he suffered that continues to impact him to this day, as well as things like thinking about suicidal ideation and what can kind of help you in those moments. I really admire him for talking honestly about his mental health struggles, considering that so much of his life has been overshadowed by being called a fraud when he has tried to be nothing but authentic. I really struggled with this book, not because of the content, I will be honest, because of the format. I am not a big fan of books of aphorisms. I always want more. And I think sometimes that's what I struggle with short stories is that I want there just to be more and I want them to kind of pull apart and dig deeper. And so it's really tough to sometimes get a little statement that is without context or further explanation. Some of them are pretty funny. 123 is stop sighing. This is the only way I know how to breathe, which feels very real sometimes, feels very real. Or pretty funny, 176, my photo ID appears to be identifying how ugly I am, which as someone who has a truly horrible driver's license and passport, I understand. But a lot of them are thinking about struggle. So 208, a worm can fly only in the beak of a bird. He is a poet. He's a songwriter. And so he really does have a way with words. What I do like about a book of aphorisms like this is every once in a while, like with a bit of poetry, you stumble across something that really resonates and you kind of have to sit with and think over and chew on for a little while. But you do have to go through all of them. And so that is definitely why this book has sat on my shelf for a very long time. But honestly, I'm really happy for the opportunity to have been forced to read through this. It's really interesting, kind of getting a little bit of a peek into the mind of someone who has had to be so strong to survive and, embraces both the dark and the light parts of life and is honest about the struggle between both of them. So if you are looking for a little book of aphorisms, it's going to be really tough to get a hold of because I ordered this from Book Depository. And am I still mourning the death of Book Depository? Yeah. It's really hard to get books from outside North America right now. But if you can, or if you find me and ask me to borrow it, because I have a copy now, you can definitely pick up a copy of BloNote. That again still doesn't sound right. BloNote? BloNote? Anyways. All right. So my existential question for you, and I think we've kind of answered it a little bit in different ways, but we're going to really pin it down, is which books take the longest for you to get through and why? Why does it take you a long time to get through something?
And I don't want to say that it's just because I'm not interested in it, but I find like if a book doesn't grab me right off the bat, then I definitely sometimes struggle to get through. And sometimes I don't know if I can really place why it is. I just finished one that for all like the description, everything should have been a book that I absolutely loved, but I just inputted onto my spreadsheet. It took me 118 days to read because I just wasn't feeling it. Like I just wasn't, and I wasn't actively reading it the whole time, obviously, but I would just kind of pick it up and then not really want to read it anymore and put it down. I think that for me, if I'm not drawn in, if I don't have something that's going to hook me right off the bat, then it does definitely take me time. One thing I will say to that though is audiobooks will usually help me get through books a lot quicker because I'm going to listen to them while I'm driving regardless. And so maybe I just zone out during points that I would otherwise struggle to like focus on and read if I'm actually having to kind of do the voice myself. But yeah, audiobooks can usually help me. And otherwise, I don't know. I honestly don't know exactly what it is that makes me take a while with some books.
Well, I will always stop if I don't care about the book. So that's not going to be the reason for me most of the time. I'm just be like, why would I torture myself? But I think it's probably because it's a book where, and I'll maybe talk a little bit more about it in my book later, but like it's a book that like I feel like there was some points where I'm just like, okay, this is a lot. This is a lot. I need to like walk away from it a little bit. And very often it's because, like Corinne mentioned about her book earlier, it resonates with you a lot and you just want to take the time to think about it. You don't want to rush through it. And that's usually like because I don't want to rush because these are like really, really either they're really, really good sentences or they're really, really good thought-provoking things that I want to stop myself from rushing through it. And so that's usually why it took a longer time for me.
Yeah, I find that I lose steam. And that's why I really try to force myself to read something in one go, because I find that if I'm like even mildly ambivalent about it, I will just kind of zoom. And there's definitely some formats that I struggle with more than others. Anything that's short stories, I find takes me an age. I've been reading Blanket Cats for like 2 weeks. It's coming due. I've got to return it. But I feel like reading one short story after another really tires me out, especially if they're quite similar to each other. And so a lot of those Japanese fiction short stories, it's pretty much the same thing over and over again. And so I feel like I need a break, but as soon as I put it down, it is gone. It's out of my brain. I don't think about it. And so I found that those types of collections, they take me a really, really long time to get through. Like I have been reading Before the Coffee Gets Cold for 2 years now. 2 years, because yeah, there's not enough connective tissue. There's not enough narrative drive in it. There's not enough. I just have to read one and I'm like, okay, well, I'll hopefully by the time I get to the next one, I'll have forgotten the format that we're doing. Yeah. So sometimes there's no reason. Sometimes there's no rhyme. Sometimes there's no reason. Sometimes there is a reason, but no books are abandoned. They're maybe just not for you. They're looking for their forever home. Yeah, we just need to release them back into the wild. All right. So, Virginia, our puppy dog reader, what is the book that took you a long time to get through?
All right. So my book, weirdly, also contained 259 little nooks, just like Corinne's. It's called The Book of Disquiet, and it's by Fernando Pessoa, translated from Portuguese into English by Margaret Jull Costa. And this book came to mind immediately when I saw today's topic, because it's actually a book that I deliberately chose to space out my reading. According to my spreadsheet, I started this book in October last year, and after reading about 84 pages, I said to myself, yeah, let's stop for a bit and let's walk away, and then we'll come back to this. And, you know, the intention was just like to read it a little bit every now and then. So it stay on my book card right next to me, and then I'll reach for it, read like a line. I'm like, yeah. And so as the time of this recording gets a little closer, I was like picking it up, forcing myself to like stop after reading a few bits, which is not really my usual way of reading. And then I would like go read a manga or something just to like disengage completely and just like do something completely different. So yeah, truly a book that took a long time to finish because of that. Even though it's not really a podcast-friendly book to talk about, I'm going to talk about it because it fits the topic. Fernando Pessoa is considered to be one of the greatest Portuguese poets and modernists. He writes under his own name, but also 75 other personas that he created. The very first one he made up when he was 6 years old, a French knight. He's the one who made up the term heteronyms. And so it's basically like, it's so much more than pseudonym because each of these persona has their own kind of style, has their own life story, has their own viewpoints, has their own jobs. And very often they don't agree with one another. They will reference each other in their work and all of that. And there's a lot of kind of like talk about like who actually wrote this, like the Book of Disquiet. There's some disagreement, but a large part of it is credited to this one heteronym, which is Bernard Pessoa, who is a bookkeeper. So there's references to like accounting and the office that he works in and his boss in the book. Not only is the authorship kind of in question, the order of how these are supposed to be presented is also quite unknown. The book is first published in Portuguese in 1982, which is 47 years after Pessoa died. And he's famous for having this big giant trunk when he died that he has like thousands and thousands of notes and little bits and pieces in there. And so somebody has to go in there and try to like fish out the right things to put this thing together, which is the Book of Disquiet, which supposedly is a book that he has been working on all his life. It's unedited, it's unfinished. There's a lot of like sentences that sort of like trail off because it's never done, or there's missing bits and pieces that maybe he intends to go back at some point. And all these are either like 2 lines to maximum, at least in my edition, about like 3 pages, so they're very, very short little bits of stuff. And really no one knows what Pessoa intended to do with it and what order it is supposed to be. And perhaps there really isn't any order, because I feel like each of the fragments kind of touches on their recurring themes and they're like concepts that keep coming up, but they're not really like related in some ways. The version that I bought for myself is from Serpent's Tail, and it was based on a specific Portuguese edition, which contains 259 fragments, whereas the one that the library has by New Directions, same translator, but it has like kind of more 500 or so of them, and they are kind of presented somewhat chronologically. So it's not really like a book that you can really classify. Some people still think of it as a novel because it's created by a persona, kind of like a commonplace book, a little bit like a journal diary, essay collection. Like it's just like all those words, nothing really fits. I kind of like what Electric Literature said. It's kind of like a personal blog. So you're just putting down your thoughts as they come along. And from one day to the next, you may think things differently. So there's often like contradictions in what he's saying. And I think the way that this particular editor tried to put it together, like trying to put some of the like things together, sometimes it's interesting. They're trying to create an order out of it, but I don't know if there is one. Pessoa said that this is a factless autobiography of Swa. So whatever that means. Anyway, so what is this book about? I'm gonna attempt to like explain it. I feel like it's kind of like, because they're all like fragments, they're not even nooks, they're kind of like just fragments of stuff. And I kind of feel like it's like whatever reader, whatever you bring along, like the container that you bring along, the jar that you bring along to this, and you pick up whatever and you stuff it in whatever shape that jar is whatever this is to you. Because I feel like there's a lot of things that really resonate with different readers in the book. And there's a lot of people who are very, very like this book is very, very dear to them because of that, because of the way he's able to really say things in a way that touches you. And I think because of that, and because he's a poet, so same thing, like because he's a poet, like there's just this like poetic aesthetic to this thing that you're like, I don't really know what you mean. And I'm reading the sentence like for the 5th time. I don't know what you're trying to say, but it sounds good. And there's something there. I know there's something there you're saying. I don't quite know what it is. And I think that sometimes that kind of like appeals to certain readers. And it's definitely a book about pondering about life, like a lot. I think for me, one of the biggest things that stands out is his thinking, his wish, his desire, maybe his tendency for the inner world, to keep himself kind of far away from this outside thing that is happening, from people, maybe even from yourself in some ways. And sometimes he referred this to as a dream world, that he say that he's dreaming or like dreamer. And I don't know if that's quite right, because I think we think of dreams as a different way. There's a bit more fanciful kind of connotation to it. I don't think that's what he means in terms of like when he say he's daydreaming kind of thing. But it's that world, that inside world that he wants to stay in. And for him, doing things in that world is better than doing things in the actual world. And there's many, many reasons for it. For example, he said, this is one of his quotes, what grieves me is that my best is no good, and that anyone whom I dream of, if he existed, would have done it better. Everything we do in art and or in life is the imperfect copy of what we thought of doing. So why bother doing? And then there's also things like inaction is our consolation for everything, and not acting our one great provider. No one can be king of the world except in dreams. And if we are honest, each of us wants to be king of the world. There's also points where he talked about how, because a lot of things that we do is what we remember ourselves doing, and our memories, our minds are very, very good at rewriting and crafting a version of what actually happens. It may not actually be what actually happened, but like over time, we kind of build that up in our head. So nothing is really real anyway. You're just making it up. So really, again, why don't you just make it up in the first place? I know it sounds in some ways, it sounds almost nihilistic, like just kind of like, what is the point of everything? But it's interesting because reading a lot of reviewers or readers who have read that book who really love this book, what they find, and one of them, for example, read it during the pandemic, and what they find was that this actually gives them a lot of comfort in trying to understand a world that is totally no longer real and something that they totally don't understand. You have lost your completely sense of time, when the pandemic happens. You just like have no idea what is going on. And they find reading this book and reading little bits and pieces of it actually give them a lot of peace, which is interesting. We also have people who talk about in anxiety or like in depression, they feel again very seen in the book. They find that there was just something about the way he said it that makes them feel better. And so it's sort of interesting to see the comfort that this book is giving readers. And I think part of it is that, he's kind of not like, he's saying that basically like if you're finding that peace, you're finding the solace when you're really recognizing that it's okay if you're not taking action. It's okay. You don't always have to do everything that you were hoping to do, I think, in some ways. And, he talks about the office boy who collects travel brochures, but he never go travel. He is just as happy thinking about himself being able to do all these things in his head. And so it's interesting way of kind of looking at it. I think there's definitely points when you can feel like this loneliness and this helplessness and hopelessness in the book. And I think that's why small doses at a time. And you're reading a line, you're like, interesting. But yeah, I find that it's just like, I think it depends on what mindset you're in at that moment. When you're reading a specific line, sometimes it will makes you kind of feel like, I don't know, in some ways, it's like not just that there's nothing matters or that like it's okay to kind of let go. It's okay to live in that world that you create yourself and all of that. And I think he's very much one of the words, a Portuguese word that very much always associate with Pessoa is saudade, I think. And it's from the Latin word means solitude. And according to the internet, there's not really a specific translation to that, but it's basically in the book very often is translated as nostalgia, or maybe this kind of melancholic kind of longing for something that you have lost that you will never get back. And I think it's that acceptance that there's something missing and that you don't have to look out in the outside world to find the significance for you. And so there's a lot of like kind of things like that in the book. And I find even just like this morning, same thing, just picking it up. Like you can see it's like one of those books that has like all the quotes and then I'm like picking it up. I'm just like, oh yeah, like, and you just read a line, you're like, oh. And speaking of my own reading experience, when I first picked a book, I was in awe. I think like many readers, I was just like, wow, like you read a sentence and you're like, this is exactly how I feel. This is the perfect way of describing it. How come no one has said it like this before? And that's how I felt. And then after about 84 pages, as I mentioned, I'm just like, yeah, I need some time because I'm feeling that disquiet that the book promises. And I feel like it's like every week we have one existential question and that's enough. I feel like I'm reading like one existential question after another on every single paragraph. And it gets a little overwhelming. So I was kind of like putting myself some space in this book. And when I was picking up it again, I think at times I'm just like, I was impatient. I was kind of frustrated. I was like, I don't want to continue. And I think thinking back now, it's probably because I'm just like, this is like, as you get closer to understand where he's coming from and like how he looks at the world and his thinking that he has shared with us, it's almost scary because a little bit too close to home. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to look that in the eye today. And so I find that like just reading it, sometimes I'm just like, this is a lot. I don't know if I felt that comfort that many other readers felt. I think a lot of things surface for me. I'm just like, I don't really want to go there today. As he said, one of the random quote that I picked up this morning, man should not be able to see his own face. The creator of the mirror poisoned the human soul. So it's kind of like, I feel like when I'm reading him, I'm just like, do I want to really look at this? So it's one of those books I think that will definitely give you a lot of existential crisis, give you a ready for it. Take your time with it, pick up one, and then hide the book and then come back to it or something like that. It's just that kind of book. So Book of Disquiet, Fernando Pessoa, translated by Margaret Jull Costa. And I will leave you with this line from Pessoa, just in case you're not having existential crisis enough. This is the line that made me wonder, is that why I woke up at 4 o'clock every morning? I'd woken up early and I took a long time getting ready to exist.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, so a book can take you a long time to get through for a variety of reasons. There is it's actually a title of a book. I've read the book, but I honestly like the title most of all. That's called The Things You Can Only See When You Slow Down. And so there is a wisdom to that. Sometimes flying through or rushing through something or trying to cheetah your way through a book, you miss some things. You miss those moments of introspection, or you miss like letting that question and those words kind of wash over you and getting like the time to reflect on it. If you're rushing through some things in some books, like you're missing, or you're not allowing the author the chance to kind of change you, to kind of alter you and your perspective. So there is wisdom to that. So whether you are a cheetah or a spider that makes those weird basket nests and traps that like the animals fall into and then they slowly eat them, or like a weird fish type shark thing, or a puppy dog, or just a regular old human, I am sure there is a book at your particular speed. So thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you next week with some fresh new books.
Thank you for listening. If you like our show, please tell a fellow book lover about it. You can find a list of all the books we discussed in our show notes. Join us next week for another fun book chat. Until then, keep it fictional.